Right, so the next part is looking at negative ions. Now, negative ions, there's three main groups that you need to consider. You've got the carbonates, so for example, calcium carbonates, magnesium carbonates, other metal carbonates. You've got your halides, so associated with obviously the halogens, or you've got the sulfate, which we'll have a look at the end. Right, so those are your three main negative ions. Now, carbonate is CO3 2 minus. Halides, we're talking about chloride, bromide, or iodide ions. And sulfate is SO4 2 minus ion. Okay, now the first one is relatively straightforward with carbonate or the test for carbonates. What you need to do is you need to add an acid to it. Now, if there is effervescence, so if there is any fizzing, what will happen is, what that means is it's a carbonate. So fizzing produces a carbonate. The ionic equation associated with that is worth looking at. So if you look at carbonates, CO3 2 minus reacting with an acid, so H plus ions, you'll end up with carbon dioxide and H2O. Now that's obviously not balanced, so you need to put a 2 there, and then that should be it. So that's your carbonate ion equation to show. So the effervescence is due to the carbon dioxide being produced. Now when that happens, you can then put this carbon dioxide through lime water, and then what you'll get is obviously lime water turning milky, and that therefore means that it is a carbonate. So that's relatively straightforward. You would have seen these tests before. Now with the halide ions, what you need to consider is a particular test, which is a silver nitrate test. But before that, what you need to do is you need to get rid of any impurities. So you add nitric acid to it. That gets rid of any impurities that you may have with the halides. And then you add silver nitrate. Now, silver nitrate is a common test, particularly for the halide ions. What happens with silver nitrate is you get a precipitation reaction, and again there's three possible precipitation reaction. You can have a white precipitate being formed, a cream precipitate, or a yellow precipitate. Now, obviously each of them are associated with each of the halide ions, so if it's a white precipitate, then that means it's a chloride ion. If it's a cream, it's a bromide ion, and if it's a yellow, it's iodide ion. So you can see that as you go down the group, the halogens, the colors getting away more and more away from white, and that's the order. Now with the sulfate ions, again, you first need to add an acid to get rid of any impurities. So you add HCl, that removes any impurities that may be present. And then what you add is a particular substance compound called barium chloride, and what that does is it will form a white precipitate. With that white precipitate would suggest that a sulfate ion is present. Okay, the compound that produces that precipitate is barium sulfate, so BaSO4 solid. So that's what causes that precipitate to appear, and that's all your negative ion testing. Right, the last part of this chemical analysis section is looking at instrumental analysis. Now, this is quite a short section. The main thing you want to look at, there's two parts to this, is one is looking at sort of the advantages and disadvantages of the technique. So we'll have and then the second part is looking at flame emission. Right, okay, so advantages and disadvantages of instrumental analysis. Now, the main advantage with instrumental analysis is that it's very rapid, it's very quick, so you can get data results really, really quickly. It's generally very accurate, and you only need a small sample to get some results. So you don't need a large sample size. You can do it with quite a minimal amount of sample to get some good results. The main disadvantage is very expensive. You need very sophisticated equipment to get that data. You can only really get that from trained experts, so you'll need to have people who are completely trained on getting this analysis done. And then also you need comparison data, so this will only work if you've got data which you can compare your results with. So that's relatively straightforward with advantages and disadvantages that you'll need to know regarding instrumental analysis. Now, with flame emission spectroscopy, now this is there's a lot of detail that happens that you don't actually need to know. You don't need to know the detail of it, but basically what happens is when you get a metal ion and you put it under flame, the electrons of this ion will get excited, and then it drops down, and as it drops down it releases energy. That energy is usually in the light spectrum, and that spectrum will produce its own pattern. We call that a line spectrum. So that line spectrum is specific to the metal that you are looking at. So they're all basically a blueprint of the data, and you can just compare it with the known data to identify the metal ion. Now, it can also be used to work out concentration of metals. So not just which metal it is, but also how much metal is present in the sample. Now, that's particularly important if you're thinking about quality control, if you're talking about the steel industry. So quality control in steel industry, but also you can think about the concentration of metals in water. So you need to work that out. Some water monitoring is also an important part. So because you can work out concentration of metals using flame emission, you can then work out whether water is safe to drink or not, or how much metals that you want to add to water to improve the health of a population. So that's relatively straightforward with flame emission. The common question is they'll give you these barcode type line spectrum, and you just need to make sure you can compare them with some of the data that they will give you. So that is as difficult as it gets.